With the amount of DC characters that have crossed paths over the decades, there's bound to be a variety of relationships writers have established that have had varying degrees of reception from fans. You've got your classics that have become staples of a character's mythos, and not incorporating them in mainstream adaptations would just feel out of place for most people. On the other hand, because of how long DC has been telling stories with their characters, there's bound to be some pairings that have either failed to resonate with fans or just downright problematic for one reason or another. And that's what I'm here to talk about. What are some of the worst, most diabolical relationships that have ever been established in DC media and comics? This selection is more focused on somewhat prolonged relationships in a series or an outspoken attraction between two characters over a certain period, rather than just sharing romantic feelings one time and then never again. Deathstroke's reputation is rooted in how he is often described as the deadliest and most lethal assassin / mercenary in the DC universe. There's definitely a strong badass factor when it comes to Slade Wilson, with aspects like his character design and how much of a threat he poses to some of DC's flagship heroes. He's definitely not someone to be trifled with. While being a staple of numerous hardcore TikTok edits, there's also the big elephant in the room people like to bring up when Deathstroke was plotting against the Teen Titans. That being the infamous relationship he had with Tara Markov when she was just 15 years old.
Thor, I just saw the news! Why was your name on the Epstein client list? I thought it was just an average supervillain island, I swear!
Jeff, I understand that children love Superman, but I think this is a step too far.
This gets here!
Marv Wolfman and George Perez created Tara Markov with the intent of making her a sociopathic villain who wanted to kill the Titans from the jump, someone who was willing to train under Deathstroke to infiltrate the team. Perez created this strong contrast in her visual appearances between when she would hang around with the Titans and when she was alone with Deathstroke. When alone with him, she would sometimes wear provocative outfits to make the reader aware that she had been in bed with Deathstroke. There were no plans to have Tara go through some sort of moral lesson, as the creative team intended to kill her at the end of the Judas contract. This is made very apparent at the end of the Judas contract storyline, where the narrator details how Tara hates without cause or reason, and doesn't look for reasons to hate with pure satisfaction. Despite all of this, the intent wasn't to make Deathstroke this reprehensible supervillain who would steal or kill for personal gain, and Slade himself claimed to have a strict moral code of ethics as a mercenary for hire. Writer Marv Wolfman didn't see him as a villain, but as someone who was led down the wrong path after pursuing the contract his son died for, believing he wouldn't have done the things he did if Grant Wilson hadn't met his end the way he did. Grant Wilson followed in his father's footsteps and became a mercenary. He was injected with an experimental serum that replicated his father's abilities, and ended up pursuing a contract from the Hive organization to kill the Teen Titans. A big problem, however, was that Grant was feeding off his own body's energy due to the side effects of the experimental serum, and the prolonged use of his powers ultimately led to his death, with his heart giving out while he was fighting the Titans. Deathstroke blamed the team for his son's death and swore revenge against the Titans, promising to complete the contract his son had originally set out to finish. It's kinda interesting how Wolfman views Deathstroke as someone who isn't really that bad of a guy, but then at the same time writes him to be romantically involved with a 15-year-old girl who plays into her fantasies just so he can torment some teenagers. And then you'd have Slade in the comic panels trying to lift the weight off the situation, talking about some, she found me and already had a reputation as a contract killer. She used me and I used her. Christopher Priest's Deathstroke run during the Rebirth era retconned an aspect of Tara and Slade's relationship, having it so that he never slept with her despite her constant sexual advances towards him, but the Rebirth run still explores the impact of Deathstroke's manipulation of Tara. While acknowledging that Slade's actions were indefensible and deplorable, Priest stated that labeling Deathstroke as a pedo wasn't accurate to his character because he wasn't sexually attracted to Tara, and had no actual feelings for her, rather he only used her to kill the Titans. While not being as morally bankrupt as Deathstroke using Tara for his personal gain, the pairing between Batman and Barbara Gordon has been crucified a lot more in fan discussions due to having more exposure in adaptations. There's just no way to sugarcoat it. This relationship sucks, and anyone who thinks it's good should be psychologically evaluated. I think it's important to clarify off rip that this never happens in any of the main continuity DC Comics titles. Bruce and Barbara having a romantic relationship to any degree is exclusive to the adaptations or universes Bruce Timm had a hand in, those being the DC Animated Universe, which kicked off with Batman the Animated Series, and the Killing Joke animated movie, which Bruce Timm produced. The plans were seeded in Batman Beyond when an older version of Barbara had a conversation with Terry McGinnis. The only thing that was established was that Barbara dated Dick Grayson for a brief period, they broke up, and sometime after Dick moved to Bloodhaven to become Nightwing, Barbara and Bruce started to become more friendly with one another. Then that spark ended.
She misses you.
Spring break will be coming up soon, and I'll be back in Gotham for 2 whole weeks. Won't that be nice? I just saw the news, and I was wondering if you'd gotten a new partner. Cause if you had, I'd be really upset. Cause I thought you and I were, you know.
He was hurt when I chose to stay behind with Bruce.
As his partner? His girlfriend? Whoa.
We even suggested that they had a relationship, and, you know, it said as much in the later episodes and in Batman Beyond.
And of course the fans are all going, oh, that's just so wrong. And it's like, well, that's why we did it. Because it's more interesting. You know, it's like, yeah, it is wrong. It's meant to be wrong.
Yo, hang him by his nuts and chop his dick off. Hang him by his nuts and beat him like a piñata.
Contrary to popular belief, Bruce Timm actually had nothing to do with the very infamous and controversial plot point of Bruce getting Barbara pregnant. The pregnancy wasn't established until the Batman Beyond 2.0 digital comic series by Kyle Higgins in 2013. Those comics took place on Earth 12, one of the 52 Earths in DC's established multiverse at the time, which took the canon of Batman Beyond and the DCAU as a baseline to serve as a continuation of those stories. Chapter 28 provided context to the strained relationship of the Bat family over the past 50 years in continuity, as an older Dick Grayson and Barbara Gordon tell Terry McGinnis the story as to why Dick and Bruce weren't on speaking terms. Dick was still in Bloodhaven during the events of the flashback in Batman Beyond Return of the Joker, where Tim Drake was kidnapped and brainwashed by the Joker. I'm sure most of you are familiar with that story. While Tim was still recovering after being rescued, Barbara ended her intimate relationship with Bruce and quit being Batgirl. Dick came back to Gotham after feeling guilty about not being in town to help Tim, now looking to spend time with the people he cares about. So he and Barbara started dating again. However, Barbara revealed to Bruce that she was 7 weeks pregnant, but Dick had only been back for 3. Bruce assured her that he wouldn't meddle with her and Dick's relationship and would allow her to tell Dick on her own terms. Since the past version of Bruce in this series was a dickhead, he goes against his promises to Barbara and tells Dick about his past relationship with her and the pregnancy before Barbara could. Dick is furious when learning about all of this, and to add insult to injury, Barbara ended up having a miscarriage. Writer Kyle Higgins wanted to take the opportunity to answer the questions he had as a longtime fan of Batman Beyond in a very dramatic way. He wondered how well Bruce and Barbara being together went over with Dick, and how the unhealthy nature of the whole thing made it interesting. For the Killing Joke adaptation, Bruce Timm explained how the source material wasn't long enough to be adapted into a feature-length film, which meant that the creatives had to add more to the story. The first 30 or so minutes revolves around a subplot that is completely disconnected from the actual Killing Joke story, and it was written with the purpose of giving Barbara more screen time as Batgirl and fleshing out her character before she gets shot. But the remaining runtime is actually very faithful to Alan Moore's original story. I can understand wanting to give the audience more emotional investment, but I don't think having Barbara being intimate with Batman on a freaking rooftop is the most effective way to achieve that. Alan Burnett, Bruce Timm, and Brian Azzarello all came to the same idea of using Barbara and Bruce's relationship to show that these characters make mistakes and that relationships can be messy. Bruce Timm also believes that there is an unstated attraction between the two that's present in the comics and even in the Adam West show. The fact that my goat would even entertain the idea of being romantically involved with Barbara to any degree in any adaptation that cements the glaring age difference pisses me off to no end. In the DCAU, it severely damages this version of Bruce, considering Barbara was the ex of his practically adopted son, with Dick rightfully pointing out how Bruce knew how Dick felt about Barbara since he was in college, coupled with the fact that she's the daughter of his good friend and police commissioner, Jim Gordon, who he had built a good dynamic with for many years.
I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't show this time.
And break our tradition? Well, here's to survival. Hopefully we'll be doing this again next New Year's Eve.
Hopefully.
I pray this dog-ass relationship never gets explored in any DC property ever again. The Injustice series is riddled with problematic elements, and if you want to rage bait fans of characters like Wonder Woman or Superman, just bring up certain panels from the prequel comic or cutscenes from the 2 games. In the prequel comic series, there was a dynamic between 2 characters that never progressed into a full-blown relationship, but there was an outspoken attraction between the two. Those 2 characters being Harley Quinn and Shazam.
Bitch, you better be joking.
Despite being on opposing sides, Harley would develop a strong admiration for Shazam whenever they would cross paths, and would constantly flirt with him. At one point, she goes as far as going to Billy Batson's school, pretending to be his mom just so she could pull him out of class. She knocks him out and kidnaps him, taking him to Green Arrow's former base of operations, which she now operates in. In another instance, Harley pulls up to Billy's foster home and forces him to transform into Shazam so that she could fight him and try to talk sense into him, urging him to reject Superman's tyrannical rule. Only reason she's able to do this is because of the kryptonite pills that were established in this universe that give humans enhanced strength and durability. Throughout the majority of the Injustice Gods Among Us and Ground Zero prequel series, it was more so one-sided, with Harley deluding herself into believing she and Shazam had a good love thing going on, but eventually Shazam does tell Harley that he likes her a lot as well, and that he has to stay with Superman to keep him in check and stop him if no one else could. I wonder how well that worked out for him.
That's enough! We can't do this! Have you gone nuts?
Lois would never want it. Just...
I didn't imagine that would go so quickly.
In hindsight, I think it's fine for Harley to try and convince Shazam to reject Superman's ideology and join Batman's insurgency, as she saw the good in Billy and knew he wanted to do the right thing. But the manner in which it's executed is obviously very odd, considering Harley was aware from the jump that he was actually 13 years old. I understand she only lusted after the adult Shazam form, but still, I mean, she literally kidnapped him twice as a kid. And Billy in his Shazam form didn't have any significant problem with this and has expressed his feelings for Harley in one way or another. Donna Troy has had an interesting love life throughout her publication history and time with her Titans peers. One of her past relationships that sticks out like a sore thumb is with a character named Terry Long, whom she actually ended up marrying and having a child with. Terry Long was a divorced history professor at Manhattan University who had a daughter of his own, and he and Donna met right after his divorce. If you've noticed a pattern with the other relationships listed in this video, you can probably guess the aspect of Donna and Terry's relationship that raises some eyebrows. When they started dating, Donna was 19 and Terry was 29. Terry's social circle seemed to consist of just Donna and the rest of the Teen Titans. So you're 19 today? Join the crowd. 19? Youngsters. Children.
Oh, brother!
After marrying Terry, Donna becomes pregnant with her first child with him named Robert. But in a future timeline, her son becomes an all-powerful monarch who conquers the planet and is born with the powers of all the Titan gods, which drives him insane. A new Titans team from that future timeline travels back in time in an attempt to kill Donna Troy before she can give birth. She temporarily gives up her powers to help prevent said future and lives a normal life as a mortal alongside her husband and child. Eventually, Terry filed for divorce and petitioned the court to rule that Donna presented a danger to the life of their son, given the amount of threats that have come her way as a superhero, thus giving him full custody of his children. The end of his character came when Terry and his two kids died in a car accident during a storm in an issue of John Byrne's Wonder Woman run. This whole relationship is a bit more tame when compared to some of the other relationships that were significantly more problematic. There's nothing really interesting about Terry's character, and his dynamic with Donna was pretty unremarkable when compared to some of the other Titans relationships like Nightwing and Starfire. There's no concrete evidence of this, but many people believe that Terry Long was writer Marv Wolfman's self-insert character, given the similarities in their appearance and age at that time. Y'all remember that one time Hal Jordan had a relationship with another member of the Green Lantern Corps who was a 14-year-old alien girl?
Jesus Christ!
I know.
Arisha Rab was introduced as the new ring welder of Sector 2815, the neighboring sector to Hal's Sector 2814. Keep in mind that early on, Hal would often refer to Arisha as his little sister. Arisha developed a crush on Hal to the point where she would openly try and flirt with him, but Hal would never entertain the idea because of the glaring age difference. Arisha tried to convince him of her maturity by stating how, despite the fact that she's 14 by Earth standards, she would actually be 28 because her home planet orbits its sun twice as often as Earth does. Her love for Hal was so strong that her ring responded to her willpower and subconsciously transformed her into an adult woman. Arisha's mind ended up maturing alongside her adult body. She actually had the ability to revert back to her teenage self, but intentionally chose not to. This eventually led to a full-blown relationship between the two. Jon Stewart pointed out the weirdness of the relationship considering Hal was older than he was, and the fact that despite transforming into an adult, Arisha would have missed the experiences of growing through that change, such as actually living through her teenage years. I just have to show them I'm the same Arisha they knew, only better, and I have to show them I'm not a child molester. This pairing lasted for a couple of years, and they even moved in together in Chicago after Arisha temporarily lost her powers alongside numerous other Green Lanterns before breaking up. Almost 20 years later came the retcon of Arisha's actual age in Jeff Johns' Green Lantern run, where it was stated that she was actually over 200 years old in Earth years. The new explanation was that she was 13 years old when she met Hal, but 13 years on her planet is equivalent to 240 years on Earth due to the planet's elongated orbit due to its two suns. So yeah, DC has had its fair share of icky relationships over the years. I'm sure people will wonder about the lack of mentioning other problematic ships like Superman and Wonder Woman or whatever, which I'm no fan of, but the 5 listed here are legit some of the most bottom of the barrel, questionable pairings authors have come up with that I could find. But I'm sure there are others out there that are equally just as bad that slip through the cracks. What is the worst DC relationship listed here, or which one pisses you off the most? Or do you just so happen to actually like a couple of the ones mentioned here? for some reason. All I know is that I'm gonna need a palate cleanser with an actual good DC pairing or a relationship with good chemistry after having to delve into the creepy territory for a bit.
I love you, Lois. I probably should have told you that a long time ago.
Hey, I love you too.
See? Much better.